our biases. So we need to keep this in mind. So from this presentation, we now move on to Julián Monedero Andrés, Professor of Renewable Energies at the University of La Laguna. He has founded a business here in the Canary Islands that focuses on installation of renewables. He has worked a lot with La Gomera, and he's going to talk about renewable infrastructures integrated in the city. Julián, please come to the stage. Welcome and thank you. Well, thank you. Thanks to the Sustainable Santa Cruz Foundation for the invitation. Thank you to the City Council of Santa Cruz, the Mueve Foundation, and the island government. I think I'm the only presenter that is actually from Santa Cruz. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I'm here to talk about a topic. Well, I've been working in renewables now for more than 25 years. And it's true that in recent years, there's been a great deal of progress in renewable technologies, but as you will see, we still have a very long way to go. I'm going to concentrate first of all on what's the current situation, what type of energy are we consuming right now in Santa Cruz and in Tenerife in general. Then I'll look at where we should be heading, then what technologies and techniques, urban techniques that we could adapt to, or adopt rather, in Santa Cruz, and then I'll offer some final thoughts. So what's the situation right now? Well, you can see the final energy consumption here in the Canary Islands from 2022 data. You can see almost 80% of the energy that we consume comes from oil, and around 20% is electric energy, but not all of that is produced by renewables. Approximately around 20% renewables. So that's less than 5% actually comes from renewable sources. Now, what sectors are consuming this energy? We've left air travel aside. Around 50% of energy consumption in the Canary Islands is in land transport. The residential sector consumes around 10% and other services around 12%. Industry, only a tiny part, as well as agriculture and livestock farming. Let's look at Tenerife now. We can see here the consumption by sector. Homes consume around 35%, another third is commerce and public services, and then around 18% is hospitality. That's Tenerife. If we look at Santa Cruz in particular, the hospitality sector percentage is far less. Then there's something quite surprising which differentiates us from other regions, and that is our energy consumption is quite similar in every part of the year. Consumption is the same in summer and winter, both in residential use and other commerce and other services. So you can see this in the graphs there on the right. So what direction should we be moving towards? Well, good question. Right now, there are lots of regions and cities around the world that have committed to renewable energy targets. More than 80% of these cities are in Europe and North America. And of course, they use a lot of energy to heat their homes, heating in the winter. Around 40% of these, in fact, 55% of the objectives cover these heating needs. We can see here our goals with a green dot on the bottom left. We are aiming to have 100% renewable energy supply. This is ambitious. Another important fact is that the electric consumption per capita in the Canary Islands is around 25% less than on the mainland. So what can we do to try to change this panorama? I'm going to talk about some technologies, some techniques that might be used. The first, Margarita mentioned it this morning already, and I think this is the most important one. And that is how we're building our buildings in our cities. The architecture. This is a 1,000-year-old technology. I'm talking about passive solar energy, bioclimatic architecture. This has been used since the time when we used to live in caves. The Romans actually talked a great deal about it and used it. The idea is to build in a way that we can take advantage of the light from the sun, wind, and vegetation to ensure thermal comfort without having to intervene with electricity. We have a bioclimatic charter here. This is a type of chart where you can see the techniques that might be able to be used. By building in a completely different way, we can actually find solutions for many of our needs, our energy needs, cooling down our buildings without having to invest in any fossil fuel energies. So the first then is quite sophisticated, I suppose, and is one of the most promising, I would say. The second is photovoltaic solar energy. In 1998, and when I started to work with renewables, a photovoltaic panel was a luxury item, but the cost is now reduced around 90% in just 15 years. It costs nowadays basically what the raw materials themselves cost. And this is thanks to improvements in manufacturing processes and also an increase in market demand for these panels. They can be installed in many different ways. There are three main modalities, so those that are isolated from the network. This is common when the main electricity network doesn't reach those places, and then they can be connected to the main electricity network to sell energy and also for self-consumption. In Spain, up until 2013, it was not possible to have a self-consumption network connected to the network. And then from 2013 to 2019, we were in a bit of a limbo until there was a royal decree. But by then, we were the country that was lagging behind the most in this self-consumption which is a pity because actually we have more potential than many other countries in Europe for this solar energy. So this self-consumption is basically the idea that we can either consume the energy that we produce for ourselves, or we can share it with a community of others. So what is a self-consumption modality that is connected to the network? The idea is that the electricity is generated close to the place that it is consumed. The consumers and the generator of that energy are both connected to the electricity network. And what does it mean to be close by? Well, according to Spanish legislation, they need to either be connected to the interior network of the consumer or the transport or distribution network. And this will also require, for instance, maximum distance of 500 meters between the two. But if it's in an industrial area, then it could be a maximum of 2 kilometers away from each other. And these distances are measured by the cadastral reference. So, a part of the energy that we produce, we consume ourselves, and then the other part we sell to other consumers. That's the idea. And we can transfer this electricity by using the electricity network. Well, according to our legal framework, there are two modalities. There is self-consumption without a surplus and self-consumption with surplus. The main difference is that the first one avoids energy being put into the network, but this creates problems with regards what to do with that surplus energy. And then, with self-consumption with surplus, there are two ways to deal with that. So we can either be paid for that surplus energy. The electricity company will take money off of your electricity bill, or the excess energy that you produce can be sold to the electricity market. As I said at the beginning, there are two modalities of this self-consumption. So one is individual, and there can be one or many installations, production installations, and then there is the collective modality where there are lots of different consumers and one or lots of production installations. In our cities, we often grow upwards. There's very little roof space, so it would be good to use the roofs of other buildings, such as sports centers or leisure centers within the cities, or other infrastructure that has a roof, and share the energy between all of these consumers. Right now, in our neighboring municipality, there is a project, the La Campana Industrial Estate has some buildings that are being used to supply energy to residential blocks with very little roof space. So they're utilizing these large industrial warehouses to put these photovoltaic panels on. Oftentimes, our industrial estates have large storage units. They require very little electricity, so they're a great place where we can utilize this roof space, as I say, to generate energy for residential areas. Another interesting technology for all buildings that use hot water is this aerothermics, the domestic hot water, DHW in English. The idea is to utilize the heat in the air around us to heat up water. This helps us with one of our cancers, I would say, that we have in our buildings, and that is these water heaters. They use an awful lot of energy, and if we combine this technology with photovoltaic panels, in my opinion, this is a great option. This should be put in place in residential buildings and other buildings that use hot water, because it allows us to use, as I said, and I will say in the next slide, this excess heat. As I've said before, there is a limited roof space, and the excess heat from these photovoltaic panels can be harnessed for this aerothermics system. So it's a great combination. They work very well together. I think this is one of the best combinations for residential buildings that we have. But it's not necessarily best suited for everything, for every situation. I'm going to talk very briefly about wind energy and small-scale wind energy. This is something that's happening in lots of cities. There's very little harnessing of wind in cities because there's lots of obstacles that stop the wind from reaching these installations. The biggest problem is that where wind does reach, there are often lots of legal restrictions about how high we can build things, and they also generate noise, which can be a nuisance for residents. A great opportunity is street lighting, because we already have part of the infrastructure in place. We have the lamp post, and we could think about offshore wind farms, but there are certain legal restrictions which make that also a bit complicated. When we have a lack of bioclimatic architecture, then we can think about using this marine very low enthalpy energy. So when it's possible, and when it doesn't have a negative impact on the sea. Miriam's glaring at me here.
Por las circunstancias que sea, pues haga falta el aprovechamiento de, digamos, de la temperatura estable.
The idea about this is to take advantage of the stable temperature of seawater to heat or cool a building through a heat exchange process. There's another very forgotten renewable system, which could be very interesting for an island like Tenerife, which is so mountainous. And that is to harness the pressure of water that is being pumped up or down. We can harness this. Every 10 meters, we have pressure reducers here to avoid damage to the water pipes. So why not harness this pressure? There are actually very studies about this type of technology, and I think in a city like Santa Cruz, it would certainly be worth looking at in detail and perhaps try to include in the plans for public services and water supply. And finally, there are lots of other actions, technologies that aren't used very often. I've tried to focus today on simple solutions that are already on the market that are very feasible. We also have to think about, of course, storage, electrochemical storage. Right now, there has been a great deal of development and prices are coming down. They're going to very soon be very economically viable. So we have to adapt our energy offering to the realities of every part of the city. We need to analyze our consumption. Sometimes it's better to find ways of being more energy efficient rather than creating more energy with renewables. There are energy certificates for buildings that are very outdated and aren't adapted to the realities of the Canary Islands. It could be a very useful tool, but right now it's quite disconnected with our reality. And as we've said already this morning, it's important to monitor our energy use, who is consuming how much and where we can make savings. We need to also implement systems for energy management. And there's another concept that I've been defending for many years, and that's electrification of consumption. The more we rely on electricity with the devices that we use, and the less we rely directly on fossil fuels, then this will open up more possibilities for renewables. So, for instance, gas cookers will always need gas to work, but if we opt for an electric cooker, then there is a potential to rely on renewables in the future. So that's something important to bear in mind, and it can be applied to anything, mobility, for instance, electric vehicles. So in conclusion, this is my last slide. I think this morning we talked a lot about this. Renewables should be integrated at a local level. Carlos was talking about proximity, you know. If we install our renewable technologies in a centralized way, then we're repeating the same mistakes of the past. And we must be guided by one fundamental principle, and that is any renewable energy source must be integrated within a correct architectural infrastructure. We shouldn't over-regulate these things because often they have the opposite effect of what we're looking for. I've been working in this sector for a long time, And I've seen everything. In the beginning of the photovoltaic period, we were asked for licenses when we put these photovoltaic panels on residential buildings because it was seen as installing industry on these buildings. In fact, in the Canary Islands, there was a pioneering effort to promote these panels, but when it came down to it, it actually made it more difficult. Jose Maria was saying this morning, everything to do with these legal frameworks often end up being a stumbling block for them. Finally, I'd just like to say that there have been studies carried out in the Canary Islands that have shown that just putting these photovoltaic panels on our residential roofs, we would be able to produce 100% of the energy that we use on our island. And so this goal of becoming an island, and so not just the city, but our island as a whole, there's this island city concept. But in any case, reaching this 100% goal is possible. The future will be renewable, or it won't be. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias a Julián Monedero por este amplio repaso de cómo está la situación de las renovables en Canarias. Al final,
about the
fíjense, teniendo
current
unas
state
condiciones
of the art and what
excepcionales,
we could
tenemos una
do.
penetración de las
We have a
renovables
very
que está casi 10 puntos por
interesting
debajo de lo que están en el territorio nacional. Tenemos
perspective
sol,
about how we have
tenemos viento,
so much
tenemos
sun,
energía eólica
so
que
much
todavía está por
wind.
desarrollar.
We
Marina,
could
sin embargo,
harness
el
more
índice de
wind.
penetración de las renovables
However,
está casi 10
renewables
puntos por debajo
are
que otros puntos
less
del territorio
present
nacional, con lo
than
cual
in the rest
queda
of the
mucho,
country
mucho
by
por hacer.
10%.
Gracias a Diego por ese
So thank you
repaso.
very much,
Ha dicho
Diego,
Diego, dice,
being here
Diego se está
today.
poniendo nervioso. A Diego lo ha nombrado todo el mundo esta mañana. Diego, ¿ustedes se
Julián,
acuerdan de la serie
Diego,
aquella de
he
Los
has
Ángeles
been
de
mentioned,
Charlie?
but everyone, do you know
Y nunca veías
Charlie's
a Charlie. Bueno, pues
Angels?
Diego es el
You
gerente de
always
la
heard about
Fundación
Charlie, but you would
Santa
never
Cruz
see
Sostenible.
him.
Diego, saludos,
Diego
porque
is
hay
already
mucha gente que no
being
le pone
mentioned by
cara.
everyone, but he's also
Y
here with
entonces,
us. Please
Diego,
greet everyone so
Diego,
that
y
everyone
voy a
can
presentar
recognize you.
a
This
Diego, que
is
es el
Diego,
alma mater de
Diego,
estas
the
jornadas y el
famous
hombre
Diego.
que se ha trabajado
He has
todas
been the
estas
one
ponencias.
working on all of these